Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for connecting to this webinar with us today, and welcome to all of you. As you may know, I am Marta Fernández de Alarcón. I am the Secretary General of the Spanish Business Council, and today is a pleasure to have you all here for our webinar on business expansion in the UAE, opportunities and threats by WellTax. Today we have the privilege to have one of our esteemed chamber members, WellTax, who recently joined the chamber, and we are truly delighted to have their expertise on board. WellTax is a distinguished boutique accountancy, advisory, and tax firm with a strong presence in both the UK and the UAE. They will dig into interesting insights like business setup or expansion in the UAE, permanent establishment at a glance, subsidiary brands, etc. Today is an honor to introduce our experts. They are Lorenzo Tosonotti, partner, Michele Amirati, managing partner, and Filippo Sgarbi, associate. We really appreciate your support and collaboration. Just so you know, the Spanish Business Council is an international community. We've got a mix of Spanish and non-Spanish companies, and we create a hub of ideas, connections, and businesses ventures in the UAE. So now let's not waste any more time. Let's hear it from our WellTax speakers. Thank you so much, and you can start.
Thank you very much, Marta. Very, very sweet of you. And we are really excited to introduce you to this presentation, which is kindly hosted by the Spanish Chamber as well as us. It's a presentation giving, general knowledge on, the business expansion in the UAE. So, of course, we will be targeting in this presentation both Spanish businesses that they would want to, invest in the UAE, Spanish speakers, or everywhere else in the world targeting the UAE, so investing in the UAE, and businesses present in the UAE that would want to understand more on what's going on within the UAE territory. Okay, so of course, many opportunities, but compliance threats are always around the corner. Okay, so moving on, of course, as I said, this is a general presentation. So a quick disclaimer saying that essentially we will talk about general topics. If you need to have a specific, very deep specific question, I would, recommend seeking advice from, like consultant or specific person that they are related to the matter. Could be us, could be anyone else, but yes, disclaimer, it's important at this stage. Well, again, as Marta briefly mentioned, we are a 360 degrees tax and accounting company. We do have both presence in the UK and the UAE with the European expertise. So we are supporting internationalization, business expansion, and cross-border taxation, as well as, we do accounting compliant, even, like very interesting startups are one of our clients, part of our clients' portfolio. Okay. Quickly, what we're going to talk about is, as mentioned, like how to set up a business in the UAE, or if you're already set up in the UAE, what's going on? Have you done everything right? Permanent establishment. What if you operate, let's say, from Spain to the UAE? What are the implications we need to consider? And then once, we consider the implication, which kind of setup, subsidiary branch or representative office, could be the option in this case. And the last one, which is a bit more painful, allow me to say, is the cross-border international tax aspect. So it's a little bit more complex based on if I already have a setup here in the UAE and a setup in Spain, for instance, how do I treat these transactions? At the end, we're going to have a Q&A session kindly presented by the Secretary General Marta. So yes, without further ado, I'll leave the floor to Lorenzo, who's going to talk about business setup and expansion in the UAE. Lorenzo, to you.
Gracias, Michele. Buenos días a todos. It's a pleasure to be here today. Our promise is to do the webinar or the next seminar in Spanish, hopefully soon. Michele probably didn't mention, but we are planning to host a seminar with the Spanish Business Council on the 21st of November here in Dubai. So you will be all welcome to participate. That one will be more focused on corporate tax aspects. So let's start from the business setup in the UAE. One of the first decisions to make when you want to open a company in the UAE is the geographic form of the company, which could be mainland, free zone, or offshore. We're going to see this more in details later on. For now, I want to focus on the legal form of the company. Nowadays, we see a lot of limited liability companies opening in the UAE. This is possible thanks to the amendments to the law which were brought on the 1st of June 2021. Until then, in order to have a limited liability company in Dubai mainland, it was needed to have a partner, a local partner, owning at least 51% of the company. That's why a lot of companies were open as a sole proprietorship in case there was one individual who wanted to open the company, or civil companies in case there were two or more individuals opening the company. One important point to mention is that sole proprietorship and civil companies don't offer limited liability. It means that basically what is in stake is not just what's in the company, but the company is open under your name. So basically you are risking your own money if something should go sideways. We also work a lot with branches and subsidiaries and representative offices that, as Michele already anticipated, we're gonna see more in details later. And a lot of foundation and trust are available in the country, especially to manage the assets of the families. So going to the next topic about geographic form, as I anticipated earlier, we have three options, which are mainland, free zone, and offshore. When it comes to mainland, we have the possibility of opening a company in Dubai mainland, Abu Dhabi mainland, so any of the 7 Emirates that are available in the country. Then we also see the possibility of having a free zone company. So how do free zone work in the country? Let's say we have more than 50 free zone in the country. 50% of them are in Dubai, and they operate independently from the mainland, from the mainland government of that emirate. It means they can have separate regulation. Usually they're more flexible. We'll see these later because I want to explain the benefits of mainland jurisdiction or free zone jurisdiction. And we also have 3 offshore jurisdictions in the United Arab Emirates, which are Jafsa, Jebel Ali Free Zone, Ajman Free Zone, and Raqqa ICC, so the one from Ras Al Khaimah. We also have a look at the characteristic of the offshore jurisdiction and why you should decide to go for one of these options. So discussing the main benefits of a mainland company, we have to say that if you are interested in doing business to customer for your company, it's probably the best option, since free zone companies don't allow to trade within mainland areas. So in case you intend to sell goods within the country, mainland option is the one you should look at, since it allows the companies to do business locally and also internationally, of course. Another positive aspect of a mainland company is that they usually offer more visa allocation. So in case you need to hire employees for your company, this could be a good solution to look into. Also, usually mainland companies have they seem to me more attractive for government entities. Therefore, it's usually easier to sign a contract with a government entity if you have a mainland company instead of a free zone. We have several categories of activities that we can choose when it comes to mainland companies. The macro categories are commercial, industrial, professional, or tourism. So mainland in Dubai, for example, they have more than 2,500 activities from which you can choose, and they really offer a wide portfolio of activities from, as I said, commercial, which could be buying and selling goods in the country, to industrial, which is manufacturing activities, or even professional activities such as accountant. In our case, our company is based in mainland, or consulting services or marketing activities, to finish with tourism activities, which is also an option for mainland companies. Let's discuss now the benefits of free zone companies, which are a very interesting option, to be honest, in the country. We can see many of these free zone, a lot of companies nowadays operate in free zone. Just to mention a few, we have DFC, which is the financial center in Dubai, where a lot of companies, a lot of banks, for example, insurance companies and funds are based in this free zone. We also have ADGM, which is basically the equivalent of DFC in Abu Dhabi Global Market, and they we see the application of English common law in ADGM. Other interesting free zones can be the MCC, for example, in Dubai, which is a commodity trade center. So a lot of companies dealing with precious metals, grains, tea, gold as well, are based in this free zone. However, one very interesting option for freelancers or startup companies could be Medan, which is in the heart of Dubai, and it's particularly attractive because their costs are relatively little in comparison to other free zones or mainland companies. And there is, as I was saying, really a big variety. We also see Masdar City, which is very interesting for companies in renewable energy sector. So this is to explain that it's very important when deciding to establish a company in Dubai to have a discussion with a consultant based in the country, because there are really many options, and it's important to have a look at your specific needs, because on the basis of that, we can together, or as Michele was saying before, you can even go with another consultant, but you can look with an expert at the several options and try to decide which one is the most appropriate for yourself. Other of the advantages of free zone companies are the fact that, as I was saying, there is more flexibility. So, for example, free zone companies usually allow to establish a company without a physical office. It's permitted to have a flexi desk in one of their buildings that they offer. And this, of course, allows to save a lot of money, especially at the beginning when the company is recently incorporated. And furthermore, but it's not for today, as I was saying, we'll see this again. We'll focus more on the corporate tax aspects on the 21st of November. Free zone companies, if recognized as qualifying free zone person, can be taxed at 0%, so can be exempted from corporate tax if they perform qualifying, if they have qualifying income. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, because we'll leave it for the next time. And of course, any of you will be very welcome to join us for breakfast on that day. To complete the main differences between mainland and free zones, I would like to mention also the Emiratization aspects. So mainland companies need to have at least one employee who is an Emirati every 50. And from this year, also companies from 20 to 49 employees need to have one Emirati. From next year, 2025, they will need to have two. So before, this regulation was applying only for companies with more than 50 employees. From this year, it also applies to companies from 20 to 49. This is a rule that generally don't apply to free zone companies. And another important aspect is a WPS, wage protection system, which is the platform through which salaries are paid for mainland companies to the employees in mainland companies. We don't have this system in many of the free zone. Only a few have, for example, the MCC. Of course, this means more burden for a company in mainland to manage the pay slips and the payrolls of the employees through this system. Finally, usually free zone companies can be exempted from export and import duties. So that's something else to consider. I would like to finish this very brief overview on the kinds of companies that you can decide to open in the UAE with the offshore companies. I already told you the 3 offshore options that you have in the UAE, JAFSA, Ajman, and RAK ICC. I want very briefly to explain what they're used for and their advantages and or disadvantages. So, for example, these offshore companies are generally used to hold assets internationally or locally. They can't do business in the country, so this is very important to consider. And furthermore, there is no visa allocation for this kind of companies. So if you intend to do business in the country, if you want to hire employees, this is not the right option for you. It's a very good option if you want to keep wealth and income confidential. And another point to mention is that what we have seen in previous years is that it's quite complicated to open bank accounts for companies based in offshore. So it's something you should really think about when deciding to opening a company in offshore. And definitely, if your intention is to do business on a day-to-day basis, especially with the United Arab Emirates, that wouldn't be the right option for you. So after this brief overview regarding the kinds of companies that it's possible to open in the United Arab Emirates, I would like to leave the floor again to Michele, who will give you a brief overview of the permanent establishment characteristics.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Just moving on to what's going on if I wish to do business in the UAE. So Lorenzo was giving a nice overview on what's the situation, what's the scenario, what's the landscape in the UAE. But now, essentially, let's focus on practical aspect before trying to understand what's going on when it comes to investing in here. So essentially, there are 2 massive differences to make when it comes to, like doing business in the UAE. The identification is the first thing they look at, and it's of course either taxable resident or non-resident taxable person. So they are both under, like the radar of the corporation taxes. It's been recently introduced. Essentially, looking at the residency, and if you are residents in the UK, you must be an incorporated company, whatever LLC or free zone mainland in the UAE. So you would, by being incorporated, we assume that you are resident as well. So by being resident, you are recognized in the UAE. So you have mainland and free zone option, as Lorenzo outlined, and also incorporated outside the UAE, but controlled and managed in the UAE. What does it mean? That effectively, and this is one of the most crucial points we're going to talk about in this second session, the management, the board of directors, any strategic person is located in the UAE, so lives in the UAE, even if the company is based in Spain. And this is matter of being taxable and therefore being resident. Then we have simple natural person. The natural person, it's basically an individual that is conducting business in the UAE. And this is also a matter of corporation tax deductibility and any other person, so any specific case, usually we talk about immovable property in this case, but in both resident and non-residency, but in any other case, you can be taxable person as well. So in that case, resident. In this case, we are talking about the non-residency one. When it comes to non-residency, there are a few options. Option number one, which is the most clear one, is that I'm coming from Spain. I'm sending one of my operatives, one of my managers in the UAE to live there. And this, at the moment, of course, you're not resident. You are representing the non-resident company, but you will become resident if you stay for a certain period. So if you become, resident as a company as well, so constitute a permanent establishment. This is a fine line between resident and non-resident, because effectively, once you send, like one of your managers there, you become fully compliant. I mean, you will have to be compliant, fully compliant with the UAE jurisdiction. Therefore, permanent establishment, which we're gonna talk about in seconds, literally. And then we have, like derived UAE source income, and as a nexus in the UAE, these concepts are pretty similar. I'm just gonna give you a quick example. When we talk about nexus, as I said before, it's immovable property, so very careful. Even if you don't live there in the UAE and you are in Spain, you'd have to think about what do you do while purchasing a property and renting it out. Would you generate, are you doing it for business? So what's going on there? We need to be very careful, because you would also be a taxable person, which is not resident in this case, because you live in Spain, for instance, but under corporation tax rules. Quickly, the taxable base for non-residents, essentially, even here, we talk about, like the UAE sourced income for non-resident permanent establishment. Again, what is it implying? It implies that, like any of the below, as you can see from the slide, would be part of, like a taxable base for a non-resident. For instance, if I stay in the UK, in the UAE, and I perform an activity in the UAE, so I would be subject to corporation tax in some cases, as well as if I have my assets. I gave you example of any property, just to give a simple example, capital invested for business purposes, that would be subject for under, like the corporation tax, the UAE corporation tax. Again, quickly looking at what's going on here, if, like we have a situation of permanent establishment, the first thing to consider when it comes to permanent establishment, and we mentioned it earlier, is the place of effective management. Essentially, if I send one of my employees from Spain who's got strategic power decisions, these would constitute a permanent establishment, provided that he stays there for quite a while. So again, let's be very careful about it, and let's consider who makes decision. Let's imagine, like, a relocation in the UAE. Do these people are making decisions? So if they are making decision, this would be a place of effective management, and therefore permanent establishment. This means that we would need to think about constituting an entity, incorporating an entity in the UAE, which Filippo will talk about in a second. Again, as I said, first thing is where is the actual control and the place of effective management, but also what are the activities? Are these activities generating revenue? Do we have a fixed place of business and office? Do we have a time we need to stay there? In some cases, we have tax treaty that they say, like, for construction purposes, we need to stay up to 6 months. Otherwise, we will become permanent establishment in a site. Important to say also, like the difference between the fixed place of permanent establishment and an agent. Imagine I'm not sending my employee, but I decide to send an agent, or to have an agent living in the UAE. it all depends on the relationship I have with this agent. Because if the agent is working exclusively for me and is not independent, for example, I give holidays to the agent. I give, all the business, all the business card, all the tools, all the, like business cards as well. All these things, they would, imply a dependency. So if you are dependent, meaning that, you are treating the agent as an employee, which will, generate permanent establishment again. In case, as you can see, for non-independency, we have, of course, if some agents are not working directly for you as a person, but they are quite free to do whatever they want in whatever time they want, that's more shifting towards, like the independency. So there is no requirements from, like the Spanish entity to open up any subsidiary or branch or representative office here in the UAE. Again, like we talked about the permanent establishment, essentially it could be either or situation. As you can see here, this is an extract taken from the UAE website actually. And here it says, of course, if the situation is upside down, if we have the parent company in the UAE, but the subsidiary in a foreign jurisdiction, we would generate, provided that, like the condition that are satisfied that we previously discussed, we could generate a subsidiary or something else. Again, permanent establishment, actual controller director. Again, very careful on sending, people there. Of course, if we talk about a very short period of time, there is no worries about it. If, like our director goes there to sign a contract with the UAE company, but doesn't do anything else. So, like there are any other auxiliary activities, that's not to be worried about. In fact, we will talk about soon, but very careful on what's going on here. Do I have a branch? Do I have an office? Do I have a factory? Do I have a building there? Real estate? That would constitute a fixed place to business. Again, talking about, preparatory and auxiliary activities, as I said before, if I'm going there to sign an agreement, if I'm going there to promoting a product, which I'm not selling it yet, or simply if I have a warehouse there without anyone operating it or with a third party operating it from me and just selling products, in that case, yes, VAT would have to be considered, but not permanent establishment. And these are preparatory and auxiliary activities. Very important, again, to consider once we set up, the entity, or once we understand that we need to set up the entity, which kind of setup would be convenient for us. I'll let Filippo talk about this because this is a quite interesting topic, and it's been discussed extensively in the past, like even in our experience. And it is important once you decide or once you have the obligation to set up, to choose the right path for your company. Filippo, handing over to you.
Thank you very much, Michele. Hi everyone. So for this part, I'll try to focus a bit more about the different options you can have when moving to another country. So whether to set up a subsidiary or a branch, a representative office. Of course, there are a lot of details, but I tried here to summarize a bit the main points. So just to make it a bit more clear for everyone, I'd like to start from the bottom of my table. So the main difference between a subsidiary, a branch, and a representative office is that for a representative office, for instance, it's always non-for-profit activities. So whether you need to have an activity, for example, in Spain, where you just want to develop your brand, do some marketing, do some activations without generating revenue, representative office is always the best solution. A branch will have exactly the same activity as the parent company. However, it will have, compared, for example, to the subsidiary, it will have joint accounts with the parent company, and the parent company will be liable for any sort of case. Whereas a subsidiary, which is, let's say, the most detached entity compared to from the parent company compared to the other ones, basically allows you to do similar but different activities as well than the parent company. It has separate books of accounts, and it is completely limiting you in terms of liability. So it's really considered as another company. The other difference I would like to underline is that a subsidiary, for instance, allows you to have, no, just if you can just come back 1 second, just to finish on the verse. Yes, I just want to close with the fact that assets, for example, in subsidiary and liabilities are completely separate. Whereas the advantage of having a branch is that you can use the same assets, the same liabilities, the same kind of softwares as the parent company. So moving on the next one, I think from what I have underlined, the subsidiary, as I explained, the main advantage is that you can first of all partner with someone in the country you want to go to by, for example, not owning necessarily 100% of the company. Again, it's very important that it limits you. So if you're going in a dangerous market, if you want to invest a certain amount of money, you're not going to risk the whole capital of your company, but only the one of the subsidiary you're opening in the given one. Another important point is that the activities that you're operating there don't have necessarily to be exactly the same of the country you're originally from. And another point that I don't mention here is, for instance, the name as well. You don't need to have, you can change the name. So it can be as well an advantage to open to other opportunities. However, for example, some disadvantages is that it's always a bit more difficult because of course you're opening a different type of entity, and therefore by consequence it represents different and higher costs. Just for the branch, yeah, the advantages are that you can have, I mean, this is an advantage, but can also be a disadvantage. It means that you have 100% of the ownership. You're not allowed to give shares to someone else. It's easier to set up, and the procedures are easier. As well, as I mentioned before, the asset is something very important. It means that you can use exactly the same software. You don't have to reinvest in terms of physical assets, but softwares or anything. Obviously, disadvantages are that you're liable for that company. So again, any issues occurring in the given country, you'll be liable for it. And the activities are limited to the ones that you're operating there. So it's basically just what is important to understand of a branch is that it's basically an extension of the hands that you have in a country, in your origin country. It's just a way to operate somewhere else. It can be in another country, but even in another city. And just to make an example, commercial agencies or restaurants are not allowed. Finally, on the representative office, the advantages are mainly clear. I'll actually start from the disadvantages. Of course, you cannot do business, which is obviously a threat. So basically, your representative office on the paper will only generate a loss, but obviously you don't have to invest. So it makes it easier in terms of capital investment. The regulatory restrictions are smaller because you're not making any type of business. So in that sense, it would be easier. Another point is that you have full control on the representative office, which is exactly the same as the branch, which I didn't mention. But for example, for a subsidiary, you can have a different type of management, a different type. It's like a completely different entity in terms of operations, whereas a branch or representative office, you can have full control of it. And again, this is not really a tax-related thing, but having a representative office also develops your brand pretty easily and puts your brand a bit everywhere. Just to conclude, the documents of the parent company. So you can see here, obviously there's very typical things like the passport and everything, but what I would like to insist on is that you will have to get all these documents, so certificate of incorporation, MOA, board resolution, the business plan, sorry, not the business plan, you need to get them attested by your embassy, by the UAE embassy in your home country. So again, it's something that if you consider opening a subsidiary in the UAE, for example, or a branch, rather than just opening a completely different LLC, it's something that you need to consider because it will be definitely more expensive. So various options, but lots of things to consider. From my part, I'm over. I'm just going to hand it out now again to Michele, which is going to go a bit more in the how you operate this kind of company. So how to work in terms of transfer pricing and how it works as well in terms of withholding taxes. And I'm sure he'll be able to explain better these terms.
Thank you very much, Filippo. Thanks a lot. Thanks for handing over to me. So essentially, as Filippo mentioned, once we proceeded with the setup, the most important thing are the transaction between the entities. Let's assume we want to open up a subsidiary or a branch or a representative office. No? So what are we expecting, especially when we talk about the subsidiary and branches? In this case, like it is very important to consider that the transfer pricing, so which is very important when it comes to taxation and corporation tax, has been introduced as well as the corporation tax. So essentially, now businesses, they need to be very careful when they are transacting with related parties. Essentially, here he says that the transaction, they must be arm's length. Simply explained, we need to look at the market, and any transaction between parent and daughter company, they have to be justified as the market price, transaction. That's what arm's length means. Essentially, as mentioned, it's important to look at, like the transaction. So we have, like imagine the UAE and the UK. We have a UK and UAE situation in which, or Spain and UAE, in which we have, like goods sold by the parent company to the UK subsidiary. In this case, the price paid for the entity is the transfer price. Very, very careful in understanding the cost allocation, because I cannot sell, something which is undervalued, even if it's among the related parties, because it would be seen as tax advantageous for, like the companies. Let's say I want to sell my good from Spain to the UAE. So as, much as possible to reduce tax liability in the UAE, in Spain, because the UAE has lower tax liability. So the convenience, of course, it will be flagged by both jurisdictions, either Spain and now the UAE, because again, after this, we have the problem of the arm's length principle. So both the UAE, the FTA in this case, and the Spanish authority, they would, question if, like the arm's length principle has been used or not. Again, interesting bits about the transfer pricing. There are many methods to calculate the transfer pricing. This is a comprehensive list of methods approved by the OECD, which is the organization that supports, economic development for developed country, in which both Spain, in this case, and the UAE are adhering to. Essentially, the many methods that we need to consider. Among many methods, one of the easiest one is the cost plus pricing, which is the second one, just for you to understand, simply adding a markup 20% on top of the good or the service I provide. And also like some specific one, the one that is commonly used by professionals, is the transaction net margin method, which is effectively comparing the net profit margins versus, like other independent and other transactions. So let's compare, I sell services, I sell accountancy services. If I sell these to my own entity in the Spain, in this case, we are not set up in Spain, but we are in the UK, how much should I charge? Of course, if it costs me more than elsewhere, I would have to charge more based on the profit. So this profit, this margin on top would be justified. Okay. Then we have, of course, profit split method, resale price method, and comparable and control price. But this is all matter of going in depth and trying to understand what's going on. But it's important for you to understand the concept, and also what are the documents and the compliance check you should provide to professional in order to prepare all the transfer pricing documentation. So of course, the first thing we need to consider when it comes to transfer pricing are there any agreements in place? I was talking about services, but even company loans, interests on loans, any royalties. So if I have a trademark in Spain, I want to receive royalties from the UAE company that is using my brand, we would need to have a agreement in place. Okay. Uh, Not just that, of course, but also, like we need to understand, we need to provide a benchmark which is provided by, recognized agencies. In this case, we have many agencies such as, Standard and Poor, Moody's, for instance, that are agency looking at the benchmarking. So how much would be my accountancy service if I was to sell it to an independent parties? How much is the independent party accountancy or tax agency charging for this service? And in this case, this benchmark would have to be documented. So looking at the economic scenarios, the specific industry scenarios. So there are all documents that would have to be provided should we transact with our company overseas. The FTA in this case would query it and would want to know more about, this transfer pricing method that been used. Again, connected to it, yet very important, is the deductibility of director remuneration, because here in the UAE, what are we encountering at the moment are questions in relation to, okay, I'm not, I have to pay corporation tax, but income tax, as I don't have to pay it. So I can imagine, I can assume I can send myself as much money as I want, so I would escape taxation. This is not true, because even here we need to document what is going on with my service. Am I important for the company? Am I essential? How much, would I charge as a director? Would I receive as a director if I was to work in another company? Of course, this is like a new scenario for all of us, but we need to be able to justify what is going on and now I receive, how much I receive from the company. Of course, agreements are important, understanding, business goals. Imagine I'm receiving a bonus for the company, so it should be specified in the agreement, even if I'm the sole director and sole shareholder of the company, because the FTA would see it as not being under the arm's length principle, so not deductible under corporation tax, which means if I say I'm sending myself 1 million dirham and I'm making 1 million dirham from the company, the FTA would say what's going on here. If what is the profit that the company makes? Is it are you by yourself they are making this amount? So why are you not a sole proprietor instead? So that's these ones are example. Of course, like the steps as mentioned. We need to be very careful when it comes to the correct benchmark. Okay, we'd have to look at like what is the industry specific situation. So what are the norms, the regulation? Review it and be very careful every year once we prepare the company accounts, in order to be compliant to the FTA authorities. Okay. The last bit, which is quite interesting for you guys, is of course, if I'm talking about subsidiary versus mother company, and the mother company is in Spain, what we need to consider is that the UAE has zero withholding tax on profit on any other, like royalties as well and interest. So effectively, if I'm to send dividends to the mother company in Spain, the UAE government wouldn't ask of anything. Of course, dividend, you have to pay corporation tax, but there is not any extra charge or charges on top of any amount released from the UAE to Spain. Tax credit, of course, that's another interesting one. If I make profit in the UAE and I'm above certain threshold, the UAE can recognize certain tax credit for any corporation tax due to the UAE. This is a very, very simple example. As you can see, I'm making 3 million dirham revenue. I have 2.2 deductible expense. Taxable income is 800K. As we know, up to 375K dirham, there is no tax to pay. We got a tax payable of 9% on top of 425. Of course, the foreign tax paid, imagine I'm receiving a withholding tax on foreign tax for 5% to a service rendered to a foreign client, which would deduct, like the corporation tax due, as you can see. So yes, the UAE allows tax credit to be applied to corporation tax. Quickly, just to say, of course, as you can see, we are both based in the UK and the UAE, but we do have Spanish speakers in the team and Spanish national in the team that they can support should you wish to speak in Spanish. In this case, we will be very happy to have Marta translating it. I'm sorry, I mean, like I understand Spanish, but not proficient enough to provide you with a technical presentation such as this one. But yes, thank you very much for hosting us again, Marta, and I'll leave the floor to you for the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, all of you. It was really, really clear information. Now we have one question, sorry. For any requirement, would you be able to handle it in English and Spanish, just for some specific topics? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. As I said, it's very important to mention that we do have Spanish speaker and Spanish national in the team. So yeah, feel free to send any queries if you wish in Spanish. Again, I'm not the correct person. I would understand you, but I wouldn't be able to reply properly. So yes, don't worry about it. It's not gonna be me, although it's gonna be me supervising it, but feel free to send it in Spanish. No worries at all.
Okay, good. Many thanks for the presentation. Would it be possible to have a copy so I can send it to the HQ?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, we can send the copy of our slide. We're gonna send it to Marta, and then Marta can distribute it
Okay, so please,
accordingly.
if you can write to us an email to SpanishBusinessCouncil.ae, and I will resend the presentation to the people who is interested in having.
Perfect. I think they need to sometimes to process it, Marta, because there's been so many information in so short a period of time.
Yes. But we will upload also the video of the webinar. We will upload it in our YouTube channel in some days.
Oh, very good.
So they will have all the information. So if they want to check something, they can show again. Okay. I think there's no more questions.
Okay, good. That's could be
good.
good for us. Yeah, it's been clear. And happy to share, as I said, the presentation. Again, thank you very much, Marta, for having us.
Thank you so much for your collaboration always.
It was a pleasure. We will see you on the 21st of November. It'll be a pleasure to have a face-to-face meeting with the members so we can reply to further questions in case.
And
all right.
It is easier sometimes. So thank you so much and hope to see you soon in our next event. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Have a nice day.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.